Hi, everybody. Welcome to our first webinar for the GIST Catalyst Pitch Competition, the Global Entrepreneurship Summit in Hyderabad later this month. We're so excited that all of you were able to join us today. I know that we have people coming from all over the world, so it's morning our time, but I know we have some folks that it's like 11 p.m. and I have other people who it's probably even earlier morning. I apologize to our people in Mexico and other places, but we're so happy you're all here. So what we're going to be doing today is I have Mr. Eli Velasquez, who is going to talk about pitching in general, so all of you can be really preparing your pitches for GES. Before we get into it, I would like to introduce Christina Tamer. Christina is waving right now. She is going to be one of our mentors in person at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. She will also be doing some limited office hours ahead of the event, which I will talk about later after Eli talks. But I just wanted Christina to say hello real quick so you know who she is.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. But my name is Christina Tamer. As Mandy said, I will be with you in India at GES, available for pitch coaching and feedback on your presentations. I work at VentureWell as a program officer. I work with early stage startups from all around the world, helping them get ready to raise equity funding. So looking forward to meeting you all. Good luck.
All right, thanks, Christina. So with no further ado, I'm going to ask Eli to go ahead and kick us off. Eli, you ready?
I'm ready.
Great.
Okay, if you could give me the presenter mode. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I'm excited to be speaking with you about Pitching 101 today, and some of you may have had experience pitching. Some of you may have already gone through some pitch training. So if this is new, obviously ask questions. If this is not new, then this can be a refresher, and you're welcome to add some comments in the chat box. So if you look on the bottom bar of the Zoom bar, you'll see a little chat icon. You can click that and we can communicate on the side. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them. And depending on the question, I can either answer it as part of the lecture, if it makes sense, or I can answer it at the end during Q&A. So like I mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get started on the presentation. So again, very excited to be working with you all today. A little bit about myself. I've been working with tech startups for probably close to 20 years now. It's about 19, 20 years. And in that space, I've worked in the angel investment space. I've worked with venture capitalists and worked with a lot of technology startup companies, including tech transfer offices, incubators, accelerators, and I've had a good opportunity to see a good amount of pitch competitions, demo days, angel investor, networking events, and really got a chance to see how companies position their pitch. And so what I'm about to show you is not like the only way to pitch, but it's a very relevant way, and it expresses a lot of the information that investors want to see during a pitch. And the more effectively that you can communicate this information during your pitch, the easier it is for the investor to understand the business opportunity. And so a lot of these tips that I'm sharing with you, again, have come through lots of experience in seeing pitches and seeing business plans over the course of my career. So here's what I've identified are must-haves in any investor presentation. And we're going to go through these in detail through the course of this conversation. So feel free to take pictures of the screen, and I'm happy to share this with everyone after the presentation. And a lot of this, like I said, may be a refresher for you, but I want to add some new perspectives on it that you may not have thought about. So there's essentially 10 things that you really want to have in your presentation. First is you want to really outline the problem that you're trying to solve. You want to discuss the solution and what you bring to the table. And again, we'll talk about how you position the solution so that you don't talk too much about it, but you give people a sense of what is so valuable about your solution. You want to talk about the market. And really you should be doing your homework when it comes to the market that you're trying to penetrate, and how you're going to be attacking that market, and what are the resources you're going to be using to access that market. You also want to be talking about your competitors and who has the potential to impact your business, who has the potential to take market share, or who has or where you have the potential to garner market share from some of these competitors. You want to talk about how your idea is protected, whether it's through patents, copyrights, trade secrets, or some other means by which you're utilizing to keep competitors away from stealing your idea. Obviously, you want to talk about how you will make money. That's ultimately what's going to help drive your business be successful. If you're not making money, you just have a hobby, right? But if you're generating revenue, then that's a good, healthy business that investors are going to be interested in. This one I'm going to touch on in more detail, and this is very important because investors always seem to say, well, I invest in the team. What makes a decision on what you invest in? And they'll always tell you, I invest in the team. But if you ask 10 investors what they mean by, well, tell me what the team should look like, and what is it that attracts you to a certain team, you'll get a whole host of different answers about that. And so we're going to talk specifically about what that management team, what you should be presenting from a management team's perspective to be able to garner interest from investors. This is one that I consistently see being left out, is the investor the entrepreneur will not ask for money. And so it leaves the investor wondering what the whole point of the presentation was. So we're going to talk about how you should position that particular bit of information, and where you should not ask for certain money in certain areas, so that you don't get yourself in a bind with your pitch. The investor is going to want to know how they're going to make their money back, right? And to what extent will they make their money back? They also want to know what your exit strategy is going to be with the company, because obviously the investor doesn't want to sit in this company forever. They want to make the investment, see it grow, and see where the opportunity is to off-ramp from your business with obviously added value. And then at the end, you obviously summarize your pitch. And this last particular point, number 11, is something that I rarely see. And this is important on a multiple set of reasons. One, it definitely is polite and courteous, right? But it also gives the investor time to know that you're done with your presentation. So that thank you slide is a good one to always inject into any presentation, no matter how short or long it may be. So we're going to talk in detail about these concepts. But again, these are the basic framework of what your pitch should have. And as you evolve your pitch and continue to do homework on understanding your business model, these should continue to get stronger and stronger as you talk about them. So let's get into this. A lot of you may have heard of this concept of customer discovery and the lean startup methodology. If you have not, let's talk about this a little bit. So in the past, the way pitches were given was entrepreneurs would essentially guess, and they'd say, hey, look, I think there's a problem related to water scarcity in my community or in this particular market, and I think I need to solve that problem. And they'd go about and do some research online, maybe read some materials, and ultimately come up with some figures where they think that this is actually a problem. But over time, they would discover that even though it may have been a problem, it may not be a problem to as many people as they thought it would be a problem. Therefore, it's hard for them to actually build a business around it. So in comes this concept of customer discovery, whereby you can actually identify the problem from the actual customer, right? And in doing so, you get evidence from these particular customers about the problems that they're trying to solve and how they want those problems solved. But beyond that is what you also garner is an opportunity to understand how people make decisions to purchase something new. Because ultimately that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to convince a certain set of customers to purchase something that you offer, right? Either it's a product or a service. But within that, there's also a group of individuals that are associated with that particular purchase. And so this diagram here, or this pictorial, shows you a sense of the different kinds of customers that could ultimately impact how you buy something, right? And so if you are out talking to customers, what you want to be learning is what is the problem that they absolutely need solved. And in other words, it's a problem where they actually stay up at night thinking about this problem because it may impact the way that they do their job. It may impact the way that they operate on a day-to-day basis, right? And in actually talking to these customers, you get to garner that actual feedback. So I'm going to give you an example. I was working with a group of high school students in South Texas, and they were using this process. I taught them how to use this process because they thought that they had a problem that they wanted to solve. So I said, well, go talk to customers. And the problem that they wanted to solve was they had a group of classmates in their high school who had autism. And they wanted to provide a means for them to get therapy and to be able to engage them in a stronger way through their education. So they started doing some research, and they discovered this thing called horse therapy, where they could actually use horse riding as a means of therapy for children with autism. So in the process of thinking, hey, I think we have a problem, we said, well, then go talk to people, right? So in the process, they began talking to the operators of horse ranches. They began talking to the parents of children with autism. They began talking to doctors. They talked to clinicians and therapists. And ultimately, they discovered that the problem was large enough for them to actually begin to build an actual business model around a service that provided horseback riding therapy for children with autism. So in their process, they actually looked at all these different individuals, people who could recommend their product or service, people who influenced, right? The user in this particular case was the child, but the child's not going to actually write the check to purchase the product or service. So there were decision makers, the parents are the actual people who write the check, and of course there's saboteurs, people who don't want this product used. And so they identified this whole economic purchase cycle, and when they present it to the investors, they're now presenting the evidence of those customer interviews. And so now when you're presenting the problem, you're actually presenting it from the customer's point of view. You're no longer saying, I believe there's a problem, or I did some research and there's a problem, but ultimately you have identified an actual need in the marketplace. And so in presenting this first slide effectively, what you do is you set the tone for the investor to know what you're talking about. You know what you're talking about, okay? And so again, the ability to provide the evidence of the customer's need is going to be vital. And that's why I put in here, because you heard it directly from them. If you have actual quotes, you can put quotes in there. If you have pictures of customers that actually have this need, you begin to personalize the problem and you make it real, okay? So let's move on to the next slide. And I know there's questions coming in, and we'll get to some of these in a little bit. So in presenting the problem, obviously you now want to talk about how you are planning to solve it. Why is it that your customers are going to want this problem solved? What is it that is so valuable in what you offer that they don't currently have, that they absolutely have to move and start using your product or service, right? This is what we call the value proposition. A good friend of mine says this is the gift that you give to the customer, right? And so in talking about the value proposition, it's not talking about the features of your particular product or service. And here's where entrepreneurs get hung up. they begin to talk about the science, they begin to talk about the technology, they begin to talk about the engineering. So if we take your iPhone, for example, and let's say you have designed a camera that can be implemented into the phone much more effectively, and it provides much more clarity. You know, you can zoom better, you can do all sorts of cool things with it. When you're talking to your investors, they don't want it to get into the science of optics and lenses and things like that. They want to talk about the value that that particular product or service brings to the overall solution, right? And so if it solves a need for a particular set of customers, they're going to tell you, the customers will tell you how much more or how much less they want that particular value, right? So entrepreneurs will say, well, my product is cheaper. Yes, that may be true, but what if your product actually offers significantly more quality that a customer might actually be willing to pay more than the competitor? And so you've made an assumption that just because you come in cheaper, that customers will want to automatically buy it, right? And so what you want to be able to do is to really understand what is the true value that customers are trying to garner through that problem that they want solved. And then how will you solve it? Do you have the technology? Do you have the expertise to solve it? And so we use this a lot with, and we see this a lot with different teams that we work with, when they're able to really narrow down to the core essence of what the customer wants. So I'll give you another example. A team is developing a software that can be utilized to help treat and design therapies for cancer patients. And the problem they identified is that doctors would eventually like to use this product because doctors spend X amount of hours just doing paperwork. And so that increases their stress, which enables them, they can't see as many patients as they'd like, and so it trickles out and it creates a much bigger problem. So in talking to doctors, they said, how much time do you spend? They said, we can spend anywhere from 4 to 6 hours, just doing paperwork. How much more would you like that reduced by? Man, if we just could reduce it by a couple hours, that would help save us a lot more time that we could see a few more patients. So in this particular case, 2 more hours that this software can save them is something that they can present as a value proposition. So in their solution slide, they'd say, we're developing a cancer therapeutic software that can save doctors up to additional 2 hours of time. That's important because that translates into the value proposition. The next thing you want to talk about is what the size of your market's going to be. And this is where most investors actually kind of start. They're going to want to see, is this market large enough for us to actually see some growth? Can we see some pivots within the product or service to attack new markets? Can we redesign the product in some way so that we can actually tack on and be able to penetrate some of these additional markets? What I always see is the entrepreneur will, when they get to this slide, they'll always say, the market opportunity is huge. Okay, I think if I had $1 for every time I heard that, I'd be a millionaire by now. You don't want to really say that because the investor is going to expect you to say that. What the investor wants to see is actual dollar figures so that they can decide whether that market is huge or not. Okay, you telling them that may not be huge for them, right? It could be something where you think it's huge and they may not think that. So in doing this assessment, there's 3 really key areas that you want to focus in on. Total available market is pretty much anything that this product or service could touch within, let's say, the cancer therapeutic industries. We'll use that as an example, right? And of course, that market could touch all sorts of different things, and the analysis behind that may not be entirely clear. So that number is going to look really, really large. But it's when you start getting into the served available market and the target market is where the investors are going to see what you're thinking with respect to what this market opportunity can look like. And so in doing the research, there's a couple of different ways, right? You can actually look at the total market and begin to essentially guesstimate on how much market share you think you would have. Or we think we could capture 5% of the market, or 3% of the market, or 1% of the market. And a lot of times that is based on a guess. In other approaches, we've seen teams that will actually do the bottom-up approach. So they say, if we believe that we're trying to develop this horse riding therapy for children with autism, how many horse ranches are there in the United States, for example? How many children with autism that could actually use this product or service, right? And you begin to then actually run the calculations using your customer base as the starting point. If it's hospitals, we've seen it done with hospital beds. It's this many hospitals with this many hospital beds would utilize these many kinds of these devices across these kinds of communities, and you begin to then build out your market from there. And whether it's a local market or a countrywide market or a global market, you want to utilize those methodologies to actually describe, in some sense, how you can actually build your market from the ground up, and then what the total available market is from the top down, and then see how they coincide with each other and see if you can actually make the match. That's where I have seen entrepreneurs be very successful in how they present this, because they know their numbers very, very well from that perspective. Here's one way that you can look at this. Is the panic zone is if you actually had the entire market, that's probably not going to be very feasible or tenable for you. But the investor wants to see, if we make the investment and you succeed and execute in your milestones, that can push you into this larger stretch zone for your company. Within that space, this is where the investor is seeing where the opportunity might lie for his or her investment. Because here is where they begin to start seeing some exits, right? In the comfort zone, this is what you think you can attack now with the resources you have. And in utilizing some of those investor dollars, it's going to help you potentially stretch a little bit more within that comfort zone. But ultimately, the investor is looking to see, can I actually push this? Can my investment help push this company into a whole new market that can actually generate some real returns back to me? And so if we go back to this particular slide, in doing the market research, you definitely want to have relevant, current information. You really don't want to go back, past like 3 years maybe. Once it starts getting past 3, it starts kind of losing that flavor of relevancy. If you need to invest in market research reports, you can do that. There's materials out there, but again, just make sure that they're relevant to your market. And in doing so, again, please be ready to actually back up your calculations, because investors, believe it or not, will sit there and do math in their head. And if they see math that's incorrect, they will call you out, right? And they will point this out as something that needs to be fixed. And they potentially could see it as something that could harm, your company. So let me stop there for a little bit, see if there's any questions. I did see one earlier. Here we go. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. This one right here, everyone, this is personally, I don't like to see this kind of information, or I don't like to hear this kind of information in a pitch. And so the reason I've X'd this one out is because a lot of times companies will do this. They'll say they have this particular feature is feature 1, 2, and 3 that the competitors don't have. And all of a sudden, their company looks like it's a rock star. And it makes the competitors look like they have nothing to offer. And we know that's not true because the competitors are obviously in the market for a reason, because they offer something that customers want and they offer something that customers are paying for. And so in these particular slides, it can become very subjective of what you put in here. In other words, be careful that you're not picking things that only make your company look good, right? And so this particular chart can sometimes be harmful, or conveying this kind of information can be harmful during your pitch. And so in your pitch, you actually want to be realistic, right? And if you're going to be talking about certain features, you want to be out there describing what they are and what they aren't. I was at a pitch event last week in Boston, and there were literally investors in the room that were Googling the competitors. And they would raise their hand and they said, well, I just found another product that's just like yours. And the lady says, well, then you probably found company A or company B. And he says, well, I found company A. She says, yeah, we know them well. This is what they offer. This is what they don't offer. And then she says, with respect to company B, which some of you may have found, company B offers this, this, and this. Where we differentiate is on this particular platform. That was enough information to convey, to let us know that the entrepreneur is being intellectually honest about what their company can offer, right? And understand that they can't be all things to all people, and that there will be competition, right? And so in presenting your company, you want to present it with all of its good and the strengths of it and the weaknesses. And in the weaknesses, this is where the investment can help bolster it so that you become more competitive in the market. So as you're thinking about what your competition is going to look like, you definitely want to be doing your research. From that side of it, you want to be looking at also the types of innovations that they have developed, and also the types of innovations that they're working on. We had one particular team. She actually went to a conference where her competition was, and she just pretended she's just a regular old conference goer, and she met with a competitor and started asking them questions. And before you knew it, this individual was giving them all this information about where they're innovating, new markets that they're looking at, new technologies that they're looking to acquire. And so she walked away with an opportunity to garner insight into that competitor's strategy. And so as part of that is definitely hone up on your research. Do some patent search on the company that's competing with you, right? If you can identify areas where they're competing, download their financial reports if they're online, download their market reports, right? Get as much information as you can about these companies and understand how they fit and don't fit against you in the marketplace. The stronger you know about your competitor, the more you know, again, the stronger it's going to make your pitch sound, so that when you're fielding questions, you're already anticipating them in advance. When we talk about how you want to protect your idea, this is, again, if you have identified, let's say in this example, an opportunity where you know where your competition is developing a patent strategy, then what you can say is, we have identified that strategy, and here is how we are approaching our intellectual property strategy. And we're going to invest in patents, and you could even say to the investor, your investment will help us strengthen our IP strategy, or help us strengthen how our idea is protected. We're going to apply for new patents in this particular space. Our competitor is not moving in that space, so we want to capture that before they do. We want to protect our idea with trade secrets, and we want to make the proper investments in making sure that our technology know-how is not getting out into the public, right? If you're developing potentially software, or other materials. What are the means by which you're going to be protecting your particular business? Even including what your logo looks like, to make sure that you are what I say, you put your stake in the ground in the marketplace, and you say, this is my space, I'm claiming it, right? And here are the ways that I'm protecting it, whether it's patent, trade secrets, others, and here's how I keep people out. So I'm continuously innovating. I'm designing a patent strategy that potentially covers other countries as well because of other markets. I'm employing the right professionals, meaning legal professionals, marketing professionals, accounting professionals, so that I make sure that all of these ideas are effectively protected. Within this, though, you also want to give the investor confidence that you have taken all the necessary steps to actually protect that idea. A lot of times I see companies that will have, maybe it's a patent, and I've asked them if they've done research around how they can utilize that patent. And what I usually get, I'll ask them, have you used a patent attorney with reputation that has been doing this kind of patent work in this particular industry for a good amount of time? And usually what I get is, oh, well, my cousin's girlfriend is a patent attorney, and she might do some of this work for free, and then my neighbor knows somebody who used to be an attorney who can look at some contracts, and you get all sorts of really wacky ways that companies try to protect their intellectual property. Prove to the investor that you have the right strategy. Prove to the investor that you're talking to the right people, right? If you need to indicate who the law firm is, by all means do so. We're working with, attorney X, or we're working with law firm X, right? That people might know to indicate that you're actually doing this. And I can't stress this enough, because I do see so many companies falter in how they go about protecting their IP. We're going to spend a little bit of money, a little bit of time talking about your business model. The investor wants to know how you plan to make money, right? A lot of times the pitch will just say, we're going to sell our product and we're going to make money. But how are you going to do that, right? What are the means by which you intend to accomplish that? And where can the investor see their investment being utilized to actually do this, right? So if you are actually doing this via your direct revenue model, what you're going to be doing is you're doing this outreach directly to these customers that you've identified prior, right? So if you're doing straight up sales, you're out there selling your product, you may have a sales team, and you're out in the streets, out in the marketplace, selling your product. Subscription models, for those of you with service-based companies, maybe software, you could have a means by which companies apply. Again, the cancer software company, they have identified that hospitals would be willing to pay a subscription for that particular technology. Now they're getting into the pricing model that goes along with it, so that they can actually begin to develop what's called a revenue ramp is going to look like. How much money do you anticipate making with the first 10 hospitals, and then the next 50, and then the next 100? So it actually builds out the revenue model from that. Freemium model. A lot of times you may see companies will actually give out the product for free, and then they will upsell you in the future after you've had an opportunity to use the product, and you sort of get hooked on the product. You say, I really like it, I'd like to use more of it. You see this a lot in apps. Okay? You can download this app for free, but there's some add-ons that go along with it, and they're going to cost you $1.99 or whatever it may cost, but now you're being upsold to buy more of the product, right? On the pay-per-use, this, again, is an opportunity for you to generate revenue each time that your consumer uses your particular good or service. Virtual goods. again, this is something that is going to be more web-based for some of you out there. If you're not using that put the product in the customer's hands. And then advertising sales, right? This is going to be really for the larger audiences. This is really in what we see in the consumer to consumer marketplace. This can actually take money and investment, but in you actually selling ad space, you want to make sure that you have the right ad partner and that you're actually driving business to your company. So again, different ways for you to actually generate direct revenue. If you want to talk about ancillary revenue, if you're looking at your partnerships and different traffic partners and providers, some folks can provide referral revenue. So they would pay a referral fee in order to get customers to your site, right? And so you can have affiliate and referral partners. You can actually rent your customer email lists. That can get dangerous potentially if you're selling it to the wrong customer, because your customer may have established a certain trust level with you. And so you want to be careful in some of these three areas, because you're depending on other partners to drive business to you, right? And or you are putting the customer's information out there without a lot of control from your side. But if it's effective, it can actually be a really interesting model for you to actually generate revenue. And then, of course, back-end offers. These are essentially add-ons and a little bit more upsells that help you generate more revenue as a result. So if you're looking at this revenue models, whether they're ancillary or direct, it could be a combination, okay? And it doesn't always have to be just one or the other. You could actually have a couple of models by which you're going to be looking to generate revenue. But you at least want to demonstrate to the investor that you have a means to do that and you have a strategy to do that. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about the management team. So in this particular session, or in this particular point in the pitch, the investor's getting excited. They're seeing business opportunity in the market. You've identified a good problem. They think you have the solution. And then when they present the management team, is where the investor really wants to see whether this particular team has the expertise and the know-how to actually execute on all those things that you just talked about. Do they have the technical expertise? Do they have the right people to be doing the sales? Do they have the right people engaging with the customers, right? And so in presenting your management team, obviously everybody is a chief of some sort. Chief science officer, chief executive, chief financial, chief information, chief marketing. There's going to be a lot of chiefs on there, right? And that's fine. But what the investor wants to know is, what do they do? What's going to be their role within the company? The title is pretty much irrelevant unless we know what that title means to the startup, right? Who is the person who is most experienced and most knowledgeable with developing strategy? And who is the person that is making sure that the company is on track? Who is the person that is making sure that agreements are being signed and that the board is being kept up to date? That person who's doing that is probably the CEO, right? And when you're talking about the person who knows the product, the person who is knowledgeable about intellectual property and industry trends, right? And is knowledgeable about what things are happening in other marketplaces, both, in your community and abroad. Well, that person's probably the chief technology officer, right? Or the chief science officer. The person who is really good with customers, is really good with people, can go out there and hustle and finds new market opportunities, finds new business. Hey, we should be talking to these people. I went to this conference. I mean, that's probably your salesperson, right? And probably your chief marketing officer. So in presenting this particular slide, what you want to do is not only talk about their expertise and of course maybe their past education, you want to talk about their roles, and you want to describe a little bit about that person's personality. Okay? This is why this person is on this team. This is why we work well with each other. This is why we have formed this particular founders group to actually move this technology forward, right? And so this is an area where we usually see people talking about, there's a lot of name dropping. Well, they worked at Google, they worked at Pfizer, Johnson and Johnson, they worked at NASA, which is great, but why does that matter, right? What were they doing there specifically? And what is the personality strength that adds value to your team? Second, you want to have a diverse team, right? The investors that you're going to be pitching to, they represent all sorts of industries and backgrounds and expertise. So you want to present a very strong management team that covers those areas as well. Having men and women on the team of different educational backgrounds from different areas, right? To the extent that you can really show diversity in your team is going to go a long way with the investor, because it then shows them that you're not just isolated to the same core of individuals in your circle, but you're willing to really expand your team and be and help people grow as well within the startup company. So this is one where you have an opportunity to actually show your personality to the investor. I've seen some teams will actually, use this particular part of the pitch to be, to throw in some jokes or to throw in an opportunity to say, my colleague here, Joe, he actually likes puppies or, enjoys ice cream or whatnot. And so it gives a more of a human factor to the team as opposed to just titles. Okay. And so these are things that you should really use as a means to connect with the investor. We're going to talk about the ask next. And at the pitch I was at last week in Boston, we had some really good companies that were presenting. And there was like 11 of them that presented to about 75 investors. Out of the 11, about 4 or 5 of them did not ask for money. And so when the questions came up, they said, are there any questions? People would say, how much do you need, right? Investors want to know, is this person going to be asking for too much money, too little money? Do they even know how to ask for money? Because ultimately that's what you're going to be doing with customers anyways. You're asking them to give you your money. So this is an opportunity for you to demonstrate how you ask for money, okay? And so don't be afraid to make the ask. I'm seeking 25,000, I'm seeking 50,000, 250, 5 million, whatever that number may be. You want to give the investor a sense of what it is that you're asking for. And then 2, is it realistic? And this is where you begin to talk about what you're going to be using the money for. The money that we get will be used to hire a software developer, invest in additional intellectual property. We're going to be developing new marketing material. We're going to run some tests with this particular prototype or this test lab, right? We're going to actually run a pilot test with a farm. I mean, whatever it is that you need the money for, you want to tell them. And if you end up showing them, what you don't want to say is, I want to use the money to pay myself a salary that is like this big, right? They don't want to see you just taking the money and then just using that for all salary for people, but they want you to be strategic in how that's used. Do you need to start paying some people? That's fine, right? Do you need to start paying yourself? That's fine. But do it within reason where it doesn't hurt the business, but it actually helps accelerate the business so that maybe you can focus full time on this business, right? And investors are sensitive to that. They know that money has to go to hire people, but as long as it's not heavily weighed in one particular way or the other, they want to see a very good strategic use of those dollars. The runway is how long that money will last you, and they want to see how judicious you're going to be about using that money, right? They'll ask you, what do you think your monthly burn rate's going to be, right? How much money where are your operational costs going towards? Are you renting space in some fancy office, or are you willing to work out of a garage for free, right? So they want to see how long is my investment going to last you, and what's going to happen when that money runs out, right? So what's the strategy for either starting to generate revenue, or is there going to be another round of investment that I should expect, right? So you want to give them a good sense of what that runway is going to look like. We do get asked this question a lot, is what about the terms of my technology? Should I be pitching this in the pitch? And the answer is no. You don't want to be putting out your negotiating tactics out front, in front of everybody. What you want to do is, if you get asked, how much equity are you giving in exchange for this investment? You can easily say, if that's of interest, if you're interested in making an investment, I'd be happy to talk with you offline or privately so we can begin those discussions in earnest. Okay? You don't want to show them your hand. You don't want to show them kind of your it is that you're thinking about, and you want to see where the investor might be positioning a potential investment. Okay, so don't corner yourself by presenting your investment terms, or what you may be thinking about your investment terms. Couple more slides, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A. How will the investors make their money? Okay. Ultimately, investors will want to go in with you, and at some point they want to exit their investment, and they want to see where they will be generating the return. So you want to first and foremost begin to do some research on your industry, potentially other companies like yourself that have exited or have grown and been successful, and how did they then pay back their investors, and what did that investment look like? You know, we get all sorts of ranges. Investors want 3x or 5x or 7x or 10x. Well, what you can do is you can run some numbers and run some models, right, for the investors. Actually say, look, in the course of 3 years, we expect, if we hit all of our revenue numbers and we position ourselves for the right acquisition, you can actually stand to make 5x, 7x, 10x your investment. Again, investors know that this is high risk, but they want to start seeing how you think about their investment, and they want to see whether you're actually going to be diligent about designing the right milestones to get them there. Two, you want to give them a sense of how long that's going to take. You know, are you going to be at this for the next 5 years or 7 years? Or can you achieve some things pretty quickly where you can start getting some investors their money back, right? And in your case, that may be a good thing, where you may not want as many investors with you all the way through. So you may want to start offloading investors along the way. And again, this is the give and take between you and the investor. So the investor can see, okay, if I want to stay with this company for 18 months or 2 years or even 3 years, I know that they need to hit these milestones. So this is where I can look to make my investment. Okay, and they can decide what size check to write. And then you want to be out doing comparables, like I mentioned. Are there other companies like yours that gives the investor confidence that an exit is possible? Or are you the lone unicorn that may make it to exit? You want to give them that sense of what that opportunity can look like, because again, it helps frame for them not only their investment return, but also the market opportunity. right? And it helps them put all these pieces together. And then lastly, what you'll do is you'll essentially just summarize all of this, into 3 key points. What I have seen companies do is in their pitch, they will literally try to repeat everything that they just told me. And in the time allotted, you can't do that, right? You want to be able to give them 3 things, up to 3 things that the investor should walk away with thinking about you, and why they should invest, right? If it's because of the team or the market, or they're going to be making a good return, whatever you think positions you strongest for them to make the investment, you want to tell them. Say, this is why I think you should write money. This is why you should write a check for my company. And then, as I mentioned before, you always want to end with a thank you. And that just shows common courtesy to both them and you, and you'll get the same in return. So it creates a good relationship off the bat with the investors. So then the question is, how do you do this in 3 minutes? Because it took me 50 minutes to go through it. And so the key is actually starting with number 5, practice, practice, practice. What you have in your hands now is the actual framework for what should be in a pitch. How you deliver it can now be tailored based on who the investors are going to be, right? And so in this particular case for this competition, you're being given 3 minutes. That's not a lot of time, right? And so what you want to be able to do is to really focus in on the key points. So if you were to take those 9 things or those 10 points that I gave you and write down, let's just say 1 sentence for each one, right? You'd probably be able to finish that within maybe a minute at most. And so within that, you begin to frame out, okay, we can add a little bit more here, remove a little bit here, and it begins to frame a story. And here's what's going to be important about your pitch is the information that I gave you in this webinar was focused on a lot of facts, right? And when you deliver your pitch, the pitch should be delivered like a story. And so you want to have the intonation like you're telling a story. You don't just want to rattle off numbers, because people won't remember numbers that much. They will remember opportunity. They'll remember big problems. They'll remember you, right? They'll remember that there's something there that could potentially exit. And so you want to write down these things that will resonate with different investors. Obviously, you want to time yourself, see if you can get it done within 3 minutes, and then you iterate time and time again, because you should have, your 3-minute presentation in the top of your head. You should have your 15, 20-minute presentation in your head, and you should have the hour-long presentation in your head. What does that look like if an investor says, this is interesting to me, I'd like to set up a meeting with you next week, and stop by my office and we'll talk for an hour, right? I want to get into more detail about your presentation. So now you're expounding on your pitch and you're adding more of that background context. The 3 minutes, what you're trying to do here is you're trying to capture their attention, and you're trying to ensure that you can garner an additional meeting after that. And again, don't rush. If you're doing this right and you've taken the time to actually, memorize it, you've taken the time to understand the key points and the key strengths, you won't have to rush, because it's you just telling them what you already know about your startup. And if you're not making it up, then it comes across very clear, it comes across very calm, and again, you don't have to worry about whether you're running out of time. It'll be delivered effectively. Memorize it and practice. Okay, so pretty straightforward, easier said than done. And so it's in actually putting pen to paper that you actually begin to see it come alive, and then practicing it will actually get you there. And then let's talk about the GES competition and ways that you should be able to get your word out there. Lots of free resources as you're out getting the word about getting your friends and colleagues and family to vote for you. Use all available social media. You know, Facebook has how many users now? Like 3 billion, 4 billion, I don't even know. So use as many resources as you can to get the word out. Those networks are only as good as obviously those channels are only as good as your network. So tell as many people as you can. If you're able to, advertise in print and video. Be creative in how you get the word out, you know, but ultimately you want to be consistently in front of their face and out there marketing your team to get as many votes per day. So the voting will end November 24th at 12:01 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. 1 vote per person per day. So those are the strict rules, and you're going to be held to that. And those voting will determine who ultimately pitches at GES. And this particular link will give you more information about the competition. So that's the crux of my presentation. If there are any comments or questions that anybody has, you know, I'm happy to talk about them now. And you can post them on the chat as well.
Hi, everybody. There were a couple questions that came in earlier that I can actually answer probably more easily than Eli can. So first of all, it was asked how long is the pitch and how long for questions. As Eli said, it is a 3-minute pitch. One thing I do want to emphasize is that it is without slides. You're just going to have to get up on a stage and start talking and hopefully use your words to paint a picture for us, because we will not have slides for you at all. But 3 minutes. There will be judge feedback. To be honest, we're still trying to decide how long judge feedback will be. It'll probably be 1 to 2 minutes. So it's not going to be very long, but do be prepared to answer questions from the judges. So that was the first question. The second one was, how will we know how many votes we've had? And the answer is you won't. This is a blind vote. As it often is in the democratic process, unfortunately. So you will not be able to know how many votes you have. The follow-up question to that was, are the public votes alone what's determining who's pitching at GES? The public votes are part of what determines who will be pitching at GES, and it is a large part. So please do, like Eli said, go to your social media, get your networks to vote for you once a day. However, besides the public voting, we also do have a set of about a dozen expert reviewers who are reviewing the videos and putting in their own input. We will use the experts as well as the public voting together to decide who will be pitching at GES. So great, those were the questions I saw. Eli, is there anything else?
No, I think that was the extent of my presentation. If anybody wants to reach out, more than happy to answer any questions. But best of luck to everybody, you know, and like I said, just practice and you'll get there.
Okay, great. So now that Eli's done, I do have a couple other quick housekeeping things. You are going to get an email from me today with a whole bunch of stuff, so no need to write this down now. But I'm going to send out recording of this presentation as well as the slides, so you will have the slides to go through later. I am currently putting together a spreadsheet that has office hour times that you can sign up to meet with Eli or Christina. Also, there's a couple other mentors who I'm trying to get on that sheet. So you will have time, 20-minute slots that you can meet with them over Skype if you have specific questions. Also in that email, I will be asking you to send me some information about yourself. It will be things like your email, which we do have, but we want it again. Your cell phone, also what your WhatsApp information is, so we can get in touch with you at GES if necessary. And then lastly, I just want to remind everyone that the next webinar will be Monday, November 20th It starts at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time, and it will be led by Christina Tamer, who we all saw earlier. And she will be talking with you guys about more of the pitching skills, how do you have stage presence, how you get people interested in you, and how you don't look incredibly nervous, right? So that is what she'll be talking about on November 20th. So we will see you all then. In the meantime, I'm going to put my email address in the chat box. Please feel free to send me any emails any questions that you have. You can reach me there. You can also reach me at the programs@justnetwork.org email address that everyone's been using. But I'm always around and happy to answer questions. So in the meantime, get to working on your pitches, and we will see you on November 20th. All right. Ciao, everybody.